Welcome to episode 93 of your CySA Plus Prepcast. In today's episode, we will examine compensating controls in the context of vulnerability management. These controls are essential for mitigating risk when direct remediation is not immediately possible due to technical, operational, or strategic limitations. As cybersecurity analysts, it is vital to understand how compensating controls work, when to apply them, and how to assess their effectiveness. Compensating controls are not merely placeholders. They serve as active, carefully designed risk mitigation mechanisms that reduce exposure while supporting operational continuity. Mastering this concept not only prepares you for real-world cybersecurity work, but also strengthens your readiness for the CySA Plus exam, where compensating controls frequently appear in both multiple-choice and scenario-based questions. Let's begin with a clear and functional definition. A compensating control is a security measure implemented to reduce risk in situations where standard remediation options, such as applying a patch, removing a vulnerable service, or reconfiguring software, are not available or cannot be executed immediately. These controls serve to either prevent an exploit, detect attempted exploitation, or reduce the potential impact of a successful attack. In practice, compensating controls are most often deployed as a temporary solution, with the goal of maintaining acceptable security posture until full remediation becomes feasible. Analysts must treat these controls as part of a broader defense strategy, not as permanent substitutes for proper fixes. The need for compensating controls arises in a wide range of real-world scenarios. One of the most common involves legacy or end-of-life systems. These are often mission-critical systems that are deeply integrated into business operations and may no longer be supported by vendors. Applying patches or updates might not be an option due to compatibility issues, lack of vendor support, or the risk of destabilizing essential services. In such cases, compensating controls become essential to protecting these systems while a long-term upgrade or decommissioning strategy is developed. Analysts must balance security requirements against operational realities, implementing layered controls that reduce the attack surface and improve visibility. Another situation where compensating controls become critical is during zero-day vulnerability events. When a new, high-severity vulnerability is disclosed but no official patch is available, organizations are forced to respond quickly to an emerging risk. In this window of exposure, compensating controls serve as the primary line of defense. Analysts might disable the affected feature, restrict access to the vulnerable service, deploy intrusion prevention rules, or isolate systems at risk. Each of these measures reduces the likelihood of successful exploitation, while giving vendors time to develop a fix and organizations time to prepare for its deployment. There are also operational constraints that make compensating controls necessary. In some environments, systems cannot be taken offline for updates because they support time-sensitive processes, high-availability services, or critical infrastructure. For example, in financial institutions or healthcare environments, even a brief system outage can have severe consequences. Patching may require downtime that the organization cannot afford at the moment. In such cases, compensating controls like enhanced logging, aggressive monitoring, virtual patching, or strict network access controls help bridge the gap until remediation can be scheduled. Analysts must carefully design compensating controls to match the nature of the vulnerability they are intended to mitigate. For instance, if the vulnerability is related to remote code execution on a web server, compensating measures might include implementing or enhancing web application firewall rules, restricting public access to the service, disabling unnecessary modules, and increasing alerting thresholds for abnormal traffic. If the vulnerability involves a local privilege escalation flaw on an endpoint, compensating controls might include removing local administrative rights, restricting access to sensitive files, implementing endpoint detection tools, and enabling secure boot and integrity checking mechanisms. Network segmentation is one of the most versatile compensating controls. Analysts use segmentation to isolate vulnerable systems from the broader network. This reduces the potential for lateral movement if a system is compromised. By creating security zones and enforcing strict communication rules between them, analysts can significantly reduce the scope of impact in the event of an attack. Internal firewalls, VLANs, access control lists, and software-defined network policies are tools commonly used to implement segmentation. Proper segmentation ensures that even if a vulnerable system is exploited, the attacker's ability to move beyond that initial foothold is severely limited. Intrusion detection and prevention systems also serve as powerful compensating controls. IDS and IPS technologies monitor network traffic for known attack signatures and suspicious behavior patterns. When a vulnerability is known to be actively exploited in the wild, analysts can tune these systems to watch for relevant indicators, and in the case of IPS, automatically block malicious traffic. IDS, while passive, provides valuable telemetry that analysts can use for investigation, correlation, and escalation. These systems do not eliminate the vulnerability, but they provide critical detection and, in some cases, active defense. Web application firewalls are particularly useful when compensating for web-based vulnerabilities. If a vulnerability affects a web application and cannot be patched immediately, analysts deploy or update WAF rules to block attack payloads targeting the vulnerable endpoint. WAFs are capable of filtering traffic based on patterns, HTTP methods, content types, and more. Analysts may configure rules to block file inclusion attempts, SQL injection patterns, or dangerous input value. While not a substitute for fixing the underlying flaw, a well-diagnosed WAF can effectively shield vulnerable applications from exploitation. Endpoint detection and response solutions add an additional layer of compensating control, especially in environments where user workstations or servers are exposed to known vulnerabilities. EDR tools monitor system activity, alerting analysts to suspicious behaviors such as privilege escalation attempts, unauthorized process creation, or malicious scripts executing. Many EDR platforms can also enforce policies to block certain types of behavior, quarantine compromised assets, or roll back system changes made by malware. Analysts configure these systems to detect signs of vulnerability exploitation, providing rapid containment until systems can be updated or reconfigured. Comprehensive planning and implementation are key to successful compensating control deployment. Analysts begin with a detailed risk assessment that considers vulnerability severity, business impact, exploitability, and the operational role of affected systems. Based on this analysis, the team selects appropriate compensating controls that reduce risk to acceptable levels. Controls are then documented, implemented according to security policy, and integrated into the organization's monitoring infrastructure. Analysts also ensure that compensating controls are clearly communicated to IT operations, compliance teams, and management, so that all stakeholders understand the purpose, limitations, and lifespan of these measures. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Effective compensating control implementation extends beyond technical execution. It also involves rigorous validation and continuous monitoring. Analysts must not assume that a compensating control remains effective over time without evidence. Instead, they develop validation strategies that include scheduled vulnerability scans, targeted penetration testing, and real-world simulation exercises designed to challenge the control's effectiveness. This is especially important when a compensating control is deployed for an extended period. Without validation, there's a risk that the control will become outdated, misconfigured, or insufficient as the threat landscape evolves. Monitoring and logging are integral to any compensating control strategy. Analysts ensure that any system protected by compensating controls is instrumented with detailed logging capabilities. These logs track access attempts, configuration changes, authentication events, and anomalous behavior. Collected data is then centralized in security information and event management platforms where analysts can coordinate across multiple systems to detect coordinated attacks or suspicious trends. For instance, a system with a file inclusion vulnerability may be protected by a WAF, but analysts still monitor for failed access attempts or malformed requests that indicate probing or attack preparation. Documentation is a core element of compensating control management. Analysts record every aspect of the compensating control lifecycle, including why it was implemented, what specific vulnerability it mitigates, the exact configuration used, how its effectiveness is measured, and under what conditions it will be retired. This documentation supports audit readiness, satisfies regulatory obligations, and provides clarity for cross-functional teams. It also facilitates transitions if ownership of the system or control changes. Having well-maintained documentation ensures the organization understands its exposure and how it is being managed, even when key personnel are unavailable. Analysts must also be prepared to adapt compensating controls to changing threats. As exploit techniques evolve or new vulnerabilities emerge in adjacent systems, previously effective compensating controls may no longer offer sufficient protection. For example, a WAF rule may block a known attack pattern, but an attacker could bypass it using encoding or request splitting techniques. Analysts conduct regular reviews to determine whether existing compensating controls remain effective and whether enhancements or replacements are needed. These reviews are informed by threat intelligence feeds, vendor advisories, and lessons learned from security incidents. Another critical factor in compensating control planning is risk communication. Analysts engage with stakeholders, including IT operations teams, developers, compliance officers, and executive leadership, to explain the rationale for deploying compensating controls. They outline the risks involved, the mitigation measures in place, and the timeline for permanent remediation. This communication ensures all parties understand the temporary nature of the control and the potential consequences of not addressing the underlying vulnerability. It also facilitates buy-in for necessary remediation projects that may involve downtime or resource allocation. Regulatory compliance frameworks frequently acknowledge the legitimacy of compensating controls under specific conditions. For example, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard explicitly allows compensating controls when organizations cannot meet a requirement through prescribed methods, provided they can demonstrate that the alternative control achieves the same level of protection. In such cases, analysts must thoroughly document how the control meets the intent of the regulation and ensure that the supporting evidence can withstand auditor scrutiny. Other frameworks such as HIPAA and ISO 27001 also emphasize risk-based approaches that support the use of compensating controls when appropriate. Training is essential for ensuring that compensating controls are implemented and maintained effectively. Analysts receive ongoing education in secure architecture design, vulnerability analysis, threat modeling, and compensating control frameworks. Training also includes deep dives into specific tools used to implement controls, such as network firewalls, WAFs, EDR platforms, and micro-segmentation technologies. In addition to technical training, analysts must understand legal and regulatory requirements that influence control selection and documentation practices. This multidisciplinary expertise enables analysts to create holistic solutions that address technical risks and compliance obligations simultaneously. Threat intelligence plays an important role in compensating control strategy. Analysts use threat data to prioritize which vulnerabilities require compensating controls and to tailor controls based on the tactics, techniques, and procedures currently favored by attackers. For instance, if threat intelligence reports indicate that a particular vulnerability is being actively targeted in ransomware campaigns, analysts can escalate the control priority and deploy more aggressive detection and response mechanisms. Intelligence-led decision-making helps ensure that compensating controls are not only technically sound, but contextually relevant to the current threat landscape. One common challenge with compensating controls is the risk of complacency. Once implemented, it can be tempting for organizations to treat them as permanent solutions and postpone or abandon plans for remediation. Analysts must be vigilant in resisting this tendency by maintaining firm timelines and tracking remediation progress as part of the organization's vulnerability management program. Periodic risk assessments should reassess whether the original reasons for delaying remediation still apply and whether technological, business, or budgetary changes now make remediation feasible. To effectively manage compensating controls over the long term, analysts incorporate them into broader vulnerability management workflows. Controls are tracked alongside standard remediations in vulnerability dashboards and are included in regular status updates. This integration ensures that compensating controls are visible to leadership and that their temporary nature is acknowledged. It also enables coordinated planning for eventual replacement with permanent fixes by aligning compensating control management with enterprise vulnerability management processes. Organizations ensure a unified and transparent approach to risk reduction. To conclude, Episode 93, Compensating Controls are a vital component of any mature vulnerability management program. They provide an essential means of reducing risk when immediate remediation is not possible, allowing organizations to protect themselves while maintaining operational continuity. Effective compensating controls require thoughtful design, rigorous validation, detailed documentation, continuous monitoring, regular review, and proactive communication. When implemented properly, they serve not only as a temporary fix, but as a strategic asset in a layered defense model. Mastery of compensating control principles is critical to your success on the CySA Plus exam and to your effectiveness as a cybersecurity analyst in high-risk operational environments. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.